Good evening. My name is Layla Ilaraza, and I'm a student project manager at the Clark Forum for Contemporary Issues here at Dickinson College. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that Dickinson College was founded on the unceded territory of the Susquehannock peoples. We hereby recognize the prior status and enduring diversity of this land and the many indigenous nations that stand in relation to it, particularly the thousands of indigenous children from dozens of different nations forced or coerced into the reprogramming camp established at the Carlisle Indian Industrial School starting in 1879. Dickinson endorsed and gave material support to these cultural eradication efforts. Turn of the 20th century presidents facilitated land acquisition and charitable donations, while others conferred honorary degrees upon 2 CIIS superintendents. Dickinson faculty delivered lectures and classes both at CIIS and on campus. This relationship represents our failure to have recognized in these peoples and their nations different but no less self-sovereign ways of thinking, living, and being. We recognize and take responsibility for the college's support for this attempted eradication of indigenous peoples, a profound moral failing in stark opposition to our mission today. No single acknowledgement is sufficient to the task before us. Accordingly, this living land acknowledgement is incomplete by design and under revision by necessity. It reflects our need and desire to learn from these histories and the indigenous communities that carry them, to act consciously and responsibly with that knowledge, and to sustain our commitment to this process by regularly reviewing it. While our knowledge remains incomplete, the process of turning honestly toward our history continues to animate our acknowledgement today, even as it orients us towards a more just tomorrow. The violence of settlement, the forced relocations of tribal nations, and the cultural erasure program of the CIIS are stories we must recognize, share, and attempt to reconcile with our own. Yet, these histories do not diminish the ongoing stories, continuing sovereignty, and enduring strength of indigenous nations and people. The interrelated histories of this land lean firmly against easy characterization and the comforting simplicity of a single story. We thus offer this in-process living land acknowledgement with deep humility to the many and varied indigenous nations and peoples who, by choice or force, called this land their home. On behalf of the Clark Forum, Dickinson College, the Priestley Fund, and the Departments of Psychology, Biology, Chemistry, Data Analytics, Geosciences, Environmental Studies, Mathematics and Computer Science, and Physics and Astronomy, I would like to welcome you to the 72nd Annual Joseph Priestley Award Celebration Lecture, Positive Psychology and Beyond. There will be a question and answer session immediately following the program, so please hold all questions until that time. The Clark Forum welcomes differences of opinion expressed politely, thoughtfully, and succinctly. Disruptive behavior or harassment of the speakers, members of the Dickinson community, or audience members will not be tolerated. As a show of respect for our speakers and everyone in attendance, please stay until the end of the program, including the question and answer session. There will be a book sale and signing in the lobby immediately following the program. Given the acoustics in the ATS lobby, it is requested that people keep the noise level low so that our guests can have meaningful conversations with those purchasing books. At this time, I ask you to please silence all cell phones and other electronic devices. In the event of an emergency, please know that accessible exits are located on the west side of the building. And now, please join me in welcoming Provost and Dean of the College, Renee Kramer.
Good evening. It is my honor to welcome you to the 2024 Priestley Celebration. I welcome all of you on behalf of President John Jones, who regrets very much that he cannot be here this evening. John let me know that I can tell you he was asked to be part of the Anderson Cooper program on CNN tonight and is, as we speak, preparing his remarks to go live on television. So he won't be here this evening, and it falls to me to do this really wonderful duty, to bestow this honor. The annual celebration of the Priestley Award is one of the highlights of our academic year. 2024, as you just heard from Layla, marks the 72nd year that this award has been presented here at Dickinson. For each of those 72 years, the college community has gathered to present this award to a distinguished scientist. And we do so in memory of Joseph Priestley, who discovered oxygen and was a close friend of Dickinson's founder, Dr. Benjamin Rush. Dr. Rush actively sought to make connections with revolutionary thinkers of his time, including Joseph Priestley. Priestley, who was born near Leeds, England in 1733, prepared for a career in the ministry, but he developed a deep and active fascination with science. In pursuing his interests, Dr. Priestley turned to investigations of what he termed different types of air, explorations that led to the discovery of 9 gases, including sulfur dioxide, ammonia, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and a gas that was later named oxygen. Priestley's increasingly unorthodox views on theology, coupled with his outspoken opposition to the English slave trade and his support of the American and French revolutions, ultimately forced him to flee England for America in 1794. Once in America, Priestley formed a close friendship with the new nation's foremost physician, Dr. Benjamin Rush. Although Dr. Priestley died only 10 years after arriving in America, his connection to Dickinson College continued when we acquired much of his equipment, thereby ensuring that at the time, Dickinson students would have state-of-the-art scientific instrumentation with which to work. You can see this equipment, including a large burning glass, an air gun, a reflecting telescope, all in our college archives. These items represent some of the earliest examples of student-faculty research at Dickinson College. Over the course of time, 71 distinguished scientists, including 17 Nobel laureates, have received the prestigious Priestley Award. This list of early Priestley awardees includes Harold Urey and Linus Pauling, both recipients of a Nobel in chemistry, and the latter a Nobel Peace Prize winner. Nuclear physicist Edward Teller, climatologist Maurice Ewing. More recent honorees include Timothy Gowers, a mathematician and Fields Medal recipient, Vinton Cerf, a computer scientist who contributed to the creation of the Internet, Joan A. Stites, a molecular biochemist known for her foundational work on aspects of RNA and for her advocacy of women in science, Jo Handelsman for her pioneering research of microbial communities and her commitment to improving science education while increasing the participation of women and minoritized people in science. Our most recent recipient, Nobel laureate in physics John Mather, for his work in the field of cosmology, including his leadership of the James Webb Space Telescope mission. The presentation of this award annually demonstrates the college's strong commitment to the advancement of sciences as an integral and central focus of the liberal arts curriculum, a commitment demonstrated through our vibrant and innovative faculty and their work, our state-of-the-art science facilities, and the excellent students we attract to study sciences at the college. Each year, the responsibility of choosing the Priestley recipient rotates among Dickinson's science departments. To introduce our newest recipient of the Joseph Priestley Award, I am pleased to ask Michelle Ford, Senior Lecturer in Psychology, to come forward.
Good evening. Tonight, we have the privilege of hearing from Dr. Martin Seligman, whose visionary work in psychology spans the continuum of understanding illness to wellness, contributing to our knowledge not only of the things that break us, but also of the things that help us to thrive and flourish. Dr. Seligman was born in Albany, New York, and after graduating high school, which we learned at dinner, he went to Albany Academy with former President Durden, He attended Princeton University and then received his PhD from the University of Pennsylvania, where he would later return to teach. Dr. Seligman directs both the Penn Positive Psychology Center and the Penn Master of Applied Positive Psychology program. I was introduced to Dr. Seligman's work as a first-year graduate student in counseling psychology after he developed his theory of learned helplessness and just before he would win the presidency of the American Psychological Association by a landslide, at a pivotal point in the time of psychological practice. My introduction to him was related to a topic he's less known for, a Consumer Reports study that addressed whether psychotherapy was effective or not. For those of us who can remember what a Consumer Reports study actually is. This article literally shaped my graduate education and continues to shape the education I provide my students nearly 30 years later. In addition to his many achievements, Dr. Seligman pioneered the science of happiness and brought it not only to the field of psychology, but to a broader public audience. The beauty of his work is his ability to understand the continuum of the human emotional experience and to translate this for the public in service of improving lives. I am thrilled to welcome Dr. Martin Seligman to Dickinson this evening and excited to hear his insights on the field of positive psychology. If Dr. Seligman and Provost Kramer could please come to the podium for the presentation of the Priestley Award.
So we'll eventually move that way, but we'll start here.
I'm sorry, what should I be doing?
We will eventually move that. The Priestley Award, which includes a bronze medallion with the likeness of Dr. Priestley, was first presented in 1952 and has been presented each year since to a distinguished scientist honored for discoveries that contribute to the welfare of humankind. Dr. Seligman, I am pleased to present to you the Dickinson College Priestley Award in recognition of your extraordinary achievements. The citation for this award reads as follows. Martin E. P. Seligman receives the Joseph Priestley Award for his outstanding contributions to the field of psychology, particularly his research on learned helplessness, resilience, and optimism, and his status as the father of positive psychology, which has led to innovation in our understanding of happiness, well-being, and human flourishing. This is the award.
Wow.
We'll go towards, we'll step around. Yeah. We'll get in front. You.
Well, thank you, Renee and Michelle. I'm happy to accept the award on behalf of the field of positive psychology, but also as a Dickinson parent. So it's a special honor for me. What's the best you can ever do in life? What can you hope for? Well, interestingly, Freud and Schopenhauer told us the best we could ever do was not to be miserable. So a successful life held your suffering as close to zero as possible. And indeed, the field of psychology in many ways, and much of medicine, is based on such an illness premise. The theme of what I'm going to talk about today is that view is empirically false, morally insidious, and a dead end as a personal goal for your life as a student, as a corporation, as a university, and as a goal for the planet. There's something north of not being miserable. And let me outline how I'm going to make the argument today. I'm going to suggest to you that it has become plausible in the last 30 years for happiness and well-being to be a life goal, not just not to be miserable. I'm going to take you through a theory of well-being which says that there are 5 elements of well-being, each of which is measurable and buildable. The acronym is PERMA, where P is positive emotion. The word happiness comes to mind, but it's just one of the notions of positive emotion. The second is E, which is engagement, being completely absorbed in a lecture with someone you love in your hobby. The third element is relationships. The fourth is meaning, mattering, and purpose. And the fifth is accomplishment. So that's my working theory of what the elements of well-being are. Measurable. It turns out each of those elements is measurable, psychometrically respectable, and they're free. So I have a website called AuthenticHappiness.org. 6 million people have gone to it and taken the test. So if you want to find out what your level of meaning is relative to 250,000 women of your age in America, you can find it out. So I'm going to talk about the measurement of well-being. One of the reasons that well-being and happiness were ignored by the science of psychology was that people, we knew that having a good marriage, a lot of money, successful life caused well-being. And people said, well, it's an epiphenomenon. It's like the speedometer on your car that just indexes how you're doing. But it turns out there's now a massive amount of longitudinal evidence that your well-being right now is causal of future, and I'll talk about success, health, how long you live. So I'm going to talk about happiness not just as a nice thing to have right now, but as a cause of future, and therefore something we should be interested in building. I'm then going to talk about, can you have more of it? Can we build it? Are there interventions that work? And I'll talk about the literature on building happiness. I'll mention several applications of positive psychology. One is positive psychotherapy, but I'll also talk about its military, educational, and corporate applications. That'll take about a half an hour or so. And then I want to bring you to the cutting edge and tell you what I'm really excited about these days. And in fact, this is, for me, the most exciting time intellectually in psychology. And it's because of AI. And I'm going to talk about work we're doing on AI and how surprised I've been by the power of this. And I'll present some brand new things about AI. And one of them will be something that surprised me. A year ago, one of my former graduate students who's at Tsinghua in Beijing wrote me and said, you know, in China, we've got the same mental illness, teenage problems that you have, but we don't have enough coaches or therapists to go around. So we've created a virtual Seligman. and I'll take you through the virtual Seligman and show you some examples. By the way, I have no financial interest in this. This is strictly a legacy project for me, and the notion that 100 years from now I could be giving advice to people long after I'm gone, for me is as close to immortality as scientists can come. And I'll conclude that positive psychology has moved from infancy to adolescence, and there is a going science of positive psychology, and very importantly, a going practice of positive psychology. So that's what we're going to do in the next 40 minutes or so. So 30 years ago, where were we? As I mentioned, we're stuck in the disease model in which psychology and medicine should work on curing illness. And the best you could ever do was not to be ill. Not to be healthy, but not to be ill. Not to be happy, but not to be miserable. And I'm going to claim that that was deeply wrong-headed. Psychology was about suffering, schizophrenia, depression, anxiety, drug abuse, and the like. There was no theory of happiness or well-being. All of our theories were about the causes and the alleviation of suffering. There were no measures of well-being. All of our measures were about depression, anxiety, divorce, panic, schizophrenia, and the like. Happiness was not viewed as causal, and there were no interventions to increase well-being. All of our interventions, both pharmacological and psychological, were aimed and measured at the alleviation of suffering. The idea that there could be psychological and pharmacological interventions that actually increase happiness was absent. So let me start with my theory in working model, which says that positive psychology is concerned with 5 different elements, with measuring and building them. So the first is high subjective well-being, how you're feeling subjectively right now. Happiness, comfort, orgasm, joy, and the like. There's a whole nosology of positive emotions. Secondly, engagement, being one with the music. So when does time stop for you? And when are you completely absorbed in something like a lecture? So looking around, looks to me like about half of you are in flow at the moment. The other half of you are having sexual fantasies, by the way, which we find. And Mike Csikszentmihalyi devoted his life to the measurement of flow, when time stops for you, when you're one with the music. And interestingly, this is not an emotional or cognitive state. In fact, when you find people in flow and you stop them and you ask, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? The 85% of the time, the answer is nothing. You're truly one with the activity. So it's not an emotion. And so we're interested in measuring and building flow. The third element is relationships. The human species is not only selfish and individual, but we're hive creatures. We share a great deal in common with bees and wasps and termites. And interestingly, as someone who works in depression, I'm often asked, if I'm feeling depressed right now, what's the one thing that I can do to at least give me temporary respite from depression? And it turns out it's the following: to walk out of this lecture, go out and find someone who needs help and help them. Turns out we're wired hedonically to be part of the hive, to be altruistic. I'm not preaching here, I'm just describing that we are an altruistic species, and our hedonic system has it built in. The fourth element is meaning, mattering, and purpose. So there's a large corporate literature on productivity at work. And to the extent you think your work is meaningful, you're more productive. It's a big effect in the corporate literature. Meaning being something like belonging to and serving something you think is bigger than the self. The self is not fertile soil for meaning. Meaning is about something larger. But I should say I've changed my mind about meaning. I've come to believe it's a very pointy-headed intellectual notion. And if I asked you, Marie, how meaningful is this lecture to you? Yeah, but 50 years from now, no one's going to remember it. But there's an allied notion, mattering, that people are much better at answering. So Marie, how much do you matter to your family? If you disappeared tomorrow, what would happen? How much do you matter to Dickinson if you disappeared? So it turns out I routinely measure mattering these days rather than just meaning. And the fifth element is accomplishment. Achievement, accomplishment, and mastery. So these are the 5 elements that positive psychology measures and tries to build. Now, as I said, 30 years ago, people didn't believe that happiness was the froth on the cappuccino, not the espresso. It didn't cause anything. So due to the life's work of my late colleague, Ed Diener, there's now a massive literature on the effects of happiness right now on what's going to happen to you over the next few years. So I'm going to spend 3 minutes describing about 400 longitudinal studies, all of the form in which at time 1 right now, you measure subjective well-being. For example, your life satisfaction right now, your happiness right now, and we measure your grade point average right now. And then we wait for 2 years at Dickinson, and we ask, can we predict grade point average 2 years from now? And these studies are all of a form, how does happiness at time 1 influence grade point average, for example, holding constant your grade point average now. So these are very well done, extensive studies, and I'm going to give you a quick rundown of this literature. First, physical health. We try to quantify the protective factors in physical health. And so, for example, if you don't smoke, that adds between 2 and 3 years of life. If you exercise, that adds between 3 and 4 years of life. So one of the variables that interests me is optimism. How do you think about your futures, measured in different ways, but on the whole, it's the belief that the future is going to be better than now, that things are going to get better. There are now 20 studies of, this is for the men especially, because this is what you guys are going to die of cardiovascular death and optimism. And so the form of these studies, for example, you take 997 Dutch people at age 65, you measure cholesterol, blood pressure, age at which their parents died, and you also measure optimism, you measure all the risk factors. Then you wait for 20 years and you ask the question, who's dead? Who dies of cardiovascular disease? it turns out that being in the bottom quartile of pessimism, that is, to the extent you believe that when bad events occur to you, they're going to last forever, they're going to undermine everything you do, there's nothing you can do about it, that costs you between 6 and 8 years of life. It's about equivalent to smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day. And that's important because unlike quitting smoking, optimism is quite buildable. So that's a summary of the health and longevity literature, large literature. Social relationships. Misery loves company, but company does not like misery. And it turns out if you do cold calling and you have people make a phone call from a script either in a depressive tone or in a very chirpy tone, and you wait till people hang up on you much quicker if you're depressive. So it turns out social relationships are better for people with high PERMA. Work productivity. None of you will have known this. This is brand new data, but in recent years, I find myself with CFOs and CEOs trying to convince them it's a good idea to have a happy workforce. And I think it is in itself, but I'm invariably asked, look, my job is profit. Is this going to make the company, is it going to make more money? And the answer until last May was, honestly, I don't know. There's about 50 articles on this, but they don't meet my scientific standards. But it turns out Emmanuel Deneuve at Oxford in May published a study of 1,600 American companies employing 15 million people in which you measure at time one the well-being of workers, and then you look for the next year at profitability and stock market price. And it turns out it's a dramatic and large effect. And then even if you didn't care at all about how happy your workers are and you just wanted to make money, creating happiness in a workforce may be the best way to do it. So work productivity increases with happiness. Virtue. One of the very interesting criticisms of positive psychology came from the late Barbara Ehrenreich about 15 years ago. And she said, it's a terrible idea to try to make people happy. If you make people happy, they're not going to care about the world. Happy people are blithe, they're bad citizens. So again, there are about 20 studies of the question of good citizenship. And it turns out that people with high well-being volunteer more, they're better citizens, they're more involved in politics. And if you work on depression, as I do, it's pretty clear that when you're depressed, one of the problems is you become number one. You look inward, and that's what's going on here. So for virtuous behavior, it turns out that happy people are better citizens, and Barbara was wrong about that. Creativity. There's the Sylvia Plath myth that if you're really miserable, that's when you do good poetry and the like. Well, it turns out Sylvia Plath was a bipolar, manic depressive. When she was depressed, she did nothing at all. The poetry was written when she was hypomanic. And in general, we find out that people are more innovative and creative when they're happy. Again, substantial literature on this as well. Resilience, which is sort of my hobby horse. COVID comes around. Are you going to get depressed? or you do badly on a midterm examination. Are you going to get depressed? Well, it turns out people with high well-being are half as likely to 1/8 as likely to become depressed given tragic events, and they recover faster. So again, optimism and subjective well-being are protective factors against going under with depression. Measurable and teachable. As I mentioned, if you're interested in measuring your well-being now or the well-being of your clients, you go there, it's free, and you can measure your well-being over time. It's most important, by the way, how happy you are right now. Everyone means something different by that. But what really counts is how you change over time. That holds constant what you mean by it. So it turns out the measures are very useful. And it's not only questionnaire. So we were interested in measuring the well-being, the optimism of presidents of the United States, of sports heroes, of dead people, people who don't take questionnaires. And it turns out you can take, as we did, the nomination acceptance speeches of all the presidential candidates of the last 100 years and take every sentence and have blind raters rate it for optimism and the like. And you could use that as a surrogate predictor. It predicts the outcome of 21 of the 24 elections from 1900 to 1984. So you can measure it either with verbatim transcripts or by questionnaire. Is it teachable? Can you have more now? I only have time to talk about, from the Buddha to Tony Robbins, there have been about 200 interventions that have suggested that increased well-being. So a lot of what I've done in the last 30 years is to take each of those interventions and actually do them, and with appropriate controls, seeing which ones work. Random assignment, placebo control. There are about a dozen that stand up pretty well. The one that's up there is, you can do it tonight. Tonight, right before you go to sleep, instead of doing the natural thing, which is brooding about all the things that have gone wrong today, explicitly think about 3 things that went well, write them down, and why they went well. It turns out it's addicting, people like doing it, they sleep better, and 6 months later, life satisfaction is higher, and depression is lower. I think I only have time to talk about one of these at length. Let's see, yes, it's this one, active constructive. So as I mentioned, our photographer, my wife Mandy, is a amateur photographer. And how many of you teach marriage counseling or sex? Okay. Well, I've done that too. This is a very difficult subject to teach. And the reason is what you're doing in marriage counseling typically is you're teaching couples to fight better. You're essentially trying to change insufferable marriages to barely tolerable marriages. And that's not really a positive psychology move. So about 20 years ago, a group of positive marriage counselors said, let's think about how you celebrate together. And let's see what that predicts. So this is called active constructive responding. And the key to it is, okay, this is one of Mandy's photographs, and I'll tell you why I put it up here. So about 5 years ago, Mandy came downstairs and said, I just got a call from the editor of Black and White magazine. Black and White is the leading photographic magazine in the world. And the editor called me, said I'd won first prize. Okay, what do you say when your spouse comes to you with a victory? Now, if I hadn't read this literature on active constructive responding, I would have said, congratulations, dear, you deserve it. You're a very good photographer. That has no effect on a relationship. It's wallpaper. And in fact, you can divide the way you talk to the people you love as active, passive, constructive, destructive. So congratulations, dear, you deserve it is passive constructive, 0. Now, I've trained 40,000 drill sergeants in the United States Army. I'm not going to have time to talk about this. And they are active destructive. So when their spouse comes to them with a victory, I would have said, you know what tax bracket that's going to put us in? That's a relationship destroyer. And then there's passive destructive, which is what's for dinner, Mandy. The only thing that works, and it doesn't come naturally, you have to learn it, and I strongly recommend it, is active constructive. So the first step in active constructive is to show that you really know what's going on here. And so I said to Mandy, was it the picture of the swan that you took at Blenheim last year that won? And she said, oh, yeah. And I said, well, that's the best black and white picture of a bird I've ever seen. So the first thing I did was to show her that I knew what was going on. The second thing is to put her in touch with this victory. And roughly, here's what I said. Well, when this editor called you, exactly what did he say? And Mandy rehearsed it for me. And then I said, well, you know, you beat out all these New York Times Pulitzer Prize-winning photojournalists. What is it about your photography that stands out? And she said, well, I guess I'm very good with gray, with different shades of gray. And then I said, well, how can you use that talent? We homeschool our children to teach the kids photography and drawing and painting. And then let's open that bottle of Dom Perignon that's been sitting in the refrigerator for 3 years. It turns out when you do active constructive responding, marital commitment goes up, sex gets better, divorce goes down. So it's a new technique, and I strongly recommend it to you. So that's an example of a positive psychology intervention. So the fields in which this has taken hold, the first one was the United States military. In 2008, I got a call from the Chief of Staff of the United States Army, George, and he said, you know, come to the Pentagon, we want to talk to you. The General Staff has read this stuff about positive psychology. So I show up at the Pentagon, and I go to a meeting of a General Staff, all new to me. I did go to a military school, so I knew to call him sir. And he says, George Casey says, panic, divorce, post-traumatic stress disorder, drug addiction. What does positive psychology say about that, Dr. Seligman? And so I said, sir, a soldier's reaction to combat is Gaussian, bell-shaped. And you've just described the stuff on the left-hand side of the bell that ruins your life. In the middle, you have something called human resilience. And it basically is, for the first couple of months after a severe combat, you have a lot of symptoms, but within a couple of months, you're back to where you were. And most importantly, on the right-hand side of the bell curve, there's post-traumatic growth. And these are people who a year later are physically and psychologically stronger than they were to begin with. So my recommendation is to move the whole curve of the United States Army toward post-traumatic growth. Whereupon General Casey said a couple of things that I'll never forget. The first was, this is going to be my legacy to the United States Army. I'm going to create an army that is as psychologically strong as physically strong. And I'm allocating $140 million to it now. And so I said, well, how are you going to teach this? And we have 40,000 teachers in the Army. 40,000 teachers, says the drill sergeants. So your job, Professor Seligman, over the next 3 years will be to train 40,000 drill sergeants in positive psychology and resilience, and they will train the 1.1 million soldiers. So that's the introductory story, and it's now a regulation in the United States Army. I could give the whole lecture about this one, but I'll have to stop there with the military. Another application is positive education. Dickinson. Okay. In 2 words or fewer, what does Dickinson teach? So what I hear is things like literacy, numeracy, appreciation of literature, how to get a good job, and the like. And then the second question is, in 2 words or fewer, what do you most want in life? And the answers are fulfillment, happiness, well-being, good relationships. There's no overlap between the two. So what positive psychology says, that we can interweave the teaching of well-being with the teaching of literacy and numeracy and the like. And indeed, this is done in hundreds of schools now around the world. And again, I could spend the whole lecture on this, but it's an important application. And positive psychotherapy, again, the principles and the exercises in positive psychology have been applied to psychotherapy as well with good success. And the question is, does it work? And to answer the question of do interventions work, we now have pretty good tools. We have things called a meta-analysis, in which you take all the studies, for example, of the active constructive intervention, and you go through all of them and you ask the effect. So there are 4 large meta-analyses of the positive interventions, and the answer is it produces small to moderate positive effects, reducing depression, reducing anxiety, and increasing life satisfaction. So it works. And now I take you to the edge of what I'm thinking about and why I'm so, if I were a 20-year-old now, as you are, I would be right at the intersection of AI and positive psychology. And let me tell you what's going on here. This is work that Abby Blyler did. And the question here, if you're a coach or a therapist, what you do in your first month is you try to get to know the patient. It's called narrative identity in the jargon. And you have to be pretty good, but it takes 3 weeks to a month to be good at it. So Abby asked the question, could we use AI to short circuit the first month of therapy or coaching? And here's what she did. We asked 26 people to give us 50 random thoughts. At the same time, we took Chat 4.0 and we taught it what a narrative identity is. It's your life story that you tell to yourself. So the input here is 50 random thoughts and the demographics for the people. And so examples of these stream of consciousness thoughts are, I can't do this, I'm panicking, how am I ever going to do this, I got so much done, I'm excited to go to work, what am I going to do for dinner? And the demographics, age, gender, income, and the like. And then we said, give us her life history. And here's what you get. instantaneously. I'll just go through it a bit. A 40-year-old self-employed man from New Jersey finds himself caught between ambition and doubt, driven by desire to achieve and a lurking fear of failure. Growing up in an environment where hard work and community values were prized, he sought to make something of himself. And this goes on in this vein. Despite the internal turmoil he's built a life that resonates with contentment and pride. Each day is a dance. This is a machine generating this. Between the mundane and profound, between the roles of provider, husband, father, team member, and individual. His story is not a linear trajectory, but a complex tapestry of emotions, thoughts, responsibilities, and dreams, reflecting a life lived with depth and authenticity. So the question was this right? Was this accurate? So we give these life stories to the 26 people, and 25 of the 26 people rate it as completely accurate or mostly accurate. And most people, a majority, found it surprising and learned things they didn't know. That's the first month of therapy. We can do it immediately. We can braid together good therapists and coaches with information like this. What do you do in the second month of coaching and therapy? Well, you plot out a set of interventions. If you're good, science-based interventions that might work with such a person. So we took chat and we fed it the literature on interventions. We said, give us an intervention plan for the second month. And indeed, it did, and very plausible. We have yet to test out whether or not that would work. But basically what Abby's done here is show us that we can partner with ChatGPT to help us become better coaches and better therapists. I want to close with what really knocked my socks off about this. So Yukung Zhao, who was my graduate student, who I mentioned a year ago, wrote me and said, we've created a virtual Seligman. We've fed it your speeches, your books, and in Mandarin or in English, you can now ask it questions. And in my voice, they simulated my voice. I don't speak Mandarin, but they got me speaking Mandarin. You can get advice from this. Try it, Marty. Well, I've tried it now 300 times with very different groups of people, and it's astonishing. Unlike the doomsayers about AI, I have yet to see anything false or anything hallucinated, but on the positive side, listen to what it does. By the way, it's free. Try it. Ask it in 100, 150 words, some real problem you're having in life. One question I see very often from teenagers and college students is something like, how can I possibly be happy and optimistic in a shitty world like this with all these terrible things going on? And here's what Ask Martin says. So the prompt here was a version of that. How can I combat the existential dread I face each night while trying to fall asleep?
Oh, I can really empathize with that feeling of existential dread that creeps up at night. It's like your mind decides it's the perfect time to throw a party. And guess what? All your deepest fears and worries are invited. But you know, there's actually something quite wonderful we can do to combat this. I've always been a big fan of the 3 good things exercise. It's simple, yet surprisingly powerful. Before you go to bed, just reflect on 3 things that went well during your day. They don't have to be big wins. Maybe you enjoyed a really good cup of coffee, or you shared a laugh with a friend. And then think about why these things happened. It's not just about the good stuff. It's about recognizing your own role in making these moments happen. This practice can shift your focus from what's worrying you to what's working for you. It's a bit like reprogramming your brain to tune into a more optimistic frequency. And the beauty of it is that it can help you sleep better because you're ending your day on a high note, focusing on the positives rather than the negatives. Now, engagement is another key ingredient to a good life. It's about finding those activities where you're so absorbed, time just flies by. For some, that might be gardening or playing a musical instrument. For you, it might be something entirely different. But engaging in these activities regularly can really help keep those existential worries at bay because you're too busy being involved in something you love. Let's not forget about relationships. We humans are social creatures, and nurturing positive relationships is crucial for our well-being. So if you're lying awake at night, think about the people who bring joy into your life. Maybe plan to reach out to someone the next day or reminisce about a happy memory you shared with a loved one. Accomplishment and meaning are also vital. They're like the seasonings that add flavor to life. Setting goals, achieving them, and understanding the why behind what we do can give us a profound sense of purpose. Lastly, let's talk about human flourishing, my ultimate goal for positive psychology. It's about creating a life rich with positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and achievement, what I like to call PERMA. Every night as you lay there, think about what you can do the next day to enhance each of these elements. It might be expressing gratitude, setting a small goal, connecting with a friend, finding time for a hobby, or helping someone out. So as you nestle into bed tonight, rather than letting dread take the wheel, grab your mental pen and jot down your 3 good things. Dwell in the present, cherish your connections, and rest easy knowing that you're taking steps toward your own flourishing. Sweet dreams.
So it was obvious to me from doing this that this machine was a better therapist and a better coach than I am. For 2 reasons, at least. One is, unlike me, it remembers everything that I've written and all the interventions. I just remember the gist of what I've written. And secondly, it's got a much better bedside manner than I do. And I close with the following one. I'm 81 years old, and I've been teaching psychology for 60 years. This is my prompt. I worry about my mental and physical stamina, and I fear that my abilities are declining. I even forgot the name of a student I know well publicly the other day. I also noticed my hearing is getting worse. This makes it harder to answer questions cogently. What do you advise?
Well, first off, I want to say how wonderful it is that you've dedicated so much of your life to teaching and enriching the minds of others. It's an extraordinary accomplishment and a testament to your passion and resilience. Now, as we age, it's perfectly natural to notice certain changes in our abilities, and it can be disconcerting, to say the least. But, you know, there's this really hopeful side to the story. You see, our brains are incredibly adaptable, and they possess this fantastic ability to grow and change throughout our lives, a concept known as neuroplasticity. So even at 81, you can continue to build your mental capacity. Isn't that just remarkable? It's like how exercising can keep your body strong. Engaging in new learning experiences can help maintain cognitive fitness. So picking up a new hobby, learning a language, or even playing a musical instrument can make a significant difference. Now let's talk about the memory slips and hearing issues you mentioned. These things happen, and they're part of the natural aging process, but they don't have to define us. It's important to focus on the strengths you still have, your wisdom, your experience, and the relationships you've built over the years. And remember, everyone forgets names now and then, even the best of us. I completely understand your concerns about dementia. It's a common worry as we get older, but let's not forget that our fears can sometimes run ahead of reality. More often than not, what we're experiencing are typical age-related changes, not necessarily signs of dementia. And when it comes to your ability to lead and guide others, that's where you shine, my friend. Your role as a mentor and a source of wisdom is invaluable, and it grows richer with each year. I've got to say, your reflections on your life are truly inspiring. It sounds like you have a high level of well-being across the board, positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishment. That's what my PERMA model is all about, and I'm thrilled to hear that you rate yourself so highly in these areas. This is a clear indication that you're doing a lot of things right, and you should take great pride in that. And about your personal life with Mandy and the kids, it's clear they bring you immense joy. That's the good stuff, the stuff that makes life sparkle. The loving kindness meditation you mentioned, it's a powerful practice. It can enhance our feelings of compassion and connectedness, which are essential for our well-being. So my advice, keep engaging with life, keep learning, and keep connecting with those around you. Embrace your role as a leader and a source of positive influence, and maybe find that young colleague to take the pledge as a way to keep the lines of communication open about your performance, just as Dick Solomon did with me. But remember, it's not about stepping back. It's about stepping differently into the light of your rich experience and wisdom. In the end, it's about flourishing, my friend, continuing to grow and thrive in all aspects of life, regardless of age. Keep looking forward, keep nurturing your positive relationships, and keep making the most of this incredible journey. You've got this.
So, my conclusion. We now have a theory of happiness and well-being, PERMA. We have measures of happiness and well-being. Being happy now causes a better life in the future. So it's worth working on, not just so you feel better now, but your life goes better in the future. We now have at least a dozen reliable interventions and programs that produce increased PERMA. And what we are on the threshold of is therapy and coaching finally becoming effective. So by braiding together human coaches and human therapists with this miracle of AI, I think the future for me is thrilling for you young people. So thank you very much.
It is now time for the question and answer session. So that everyone in the audience and our speaker can hear your question clearly, please raise your hand and wait for a microphone to reach you before asking your question. We reserve the first questions for students, and then we will open up to the rest of the audience. We will now take the first question.
You talked about how marriage counseling is to help married couples fight better. Do you think that all married couples could be saved, or some people just aren't meant to be married?
I think there are a lot of failed marriages, and it's very important to know that there's a substantial literature on well-being in marriage, and the one configuration that produces the most happiness and well-being is marriage. So it certainly is worth preserving marriages, but some marriages really are hopeless. And I'm not a good enough clinician to be able to distinguish them. John and Julie Gottman have ways of distinguishing disastrous, hopeless marriages from ones that are worth working on. But at any rate, it's worth learning skills like active constructive responding, not just in marriage, but in your sorority, with people you work with, and the like. It's a great tool for increasing love and commitment.
So you talked about how happiness has a direct effect on your future, or on your future and success. Are there different types of, different ways that, sorry, let me rephrase. Are there different types of happiness in the present that could impact your future in different ways? So for instance, some people might not be happy in the present because of a life-changing event or just because they're depressed or something like that. Do those affect your future differently?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a lot of the reason for my developing the notion of PERMA. So PERMA says there are 5 different contributors to happiness. And you might think, well, the happy person is the person who has all of them. Work-life balance, people talk that way, for example. But I don't think that's so. I think it depends on what you're after in life. And so if you think about the dashboard of an airplane, depending on your mission, you pay attention to different gauges. So if you want to fly from Philadelphia to San Francisco as cheaply as possible, you pay attention to petrol. If you want to get there as fast as possible, you pay attention to speed. If you want to get there as comfortably as possible, you pay attention to the radar and thunderstorms and the like. PERMA are 5 different gauges, and what a successful, happy life is not the sum total, but different people value different things more. So I'm an M person and an E person. The things I value most in life are meaning and engagement. I don't much care about how I feel, frankly. I'm not a P person. So if I have me as a coachee or a patient, given my values, M and E, my job as a therapist is how to maximize those 2 things. So the message here is that human happiness is very value-laden. And depending on which of the things in PERMA you care about, what a happy life is about is maximizing those things that you care about. I know that wasn't a direct answer to what you were asking, but that's what I was hearing underneath it.
I was just wondering,
Okay,
and like,
where are we?
right over here.
I'm going to try to lip read.
We could probably have a whole another lecture on it. But just in a quick sense, how did you develop PERMA? And I'm just curious if there are any aspects of well-being that PERMA maybe doesn't encompass.
So I think I'm hearing, how did I develop it, and what aspects does it not encompass? I developed that out of thin air, frankly, and thinking for a long time and talking to people and reading the literature. It's not very satisfying, but that's how it came about. And it's a controversial notion for at least 2 reasons having to do with the question you asked. What doesn't it encompass? So there's a group called the PERMA H people that say that physical health is an element that people seek for its own sake. There are also PERMA V, which is vitality, that people seek vitality. And there's a PERMA R group that says responsibility is part of PERMA. These are ongoing questions now. 5 is a good number. Science becomes more cumbersome when it's 6 and 7 and 8. But it's a very good question. What are the inadequacies of the PERMA model?
Hi. I'm an international student from South Korea.
I'm going to read what you're doing.
Yeah. Currently studying in the Dickinson College. It's been almost 3 years. I'd like to ask if PERMA model and positive psychology can be applied on different countries or cultures with distinct norms and values. For example, South Korea has been quite known for as becoming the suicide republic for the past 10 years due to its competitive, hierarchical, and materialistic structure of the society. It kind of seems, for the sake of the development, the society dropped the personal happiness. So can this kind of psychology applied on societies with norms, values different from European or American counterparts?
Yes, very good question. There's a large field called cross-cultural positive psychology. There's a vibrant South Korean group that works on it. And just a couple of findings from Korea, and then I'll say what I really think is going on here. So South Koreans on average have a lower P, positive emotion, than Americans, for example, and a higher A than Americans, higher accomplishment. But because the words mean different things in Korean and English, I don't take these absolutes very seriously. What I do take seriously is changes over time within a country. And so if you have a intervention or happening in a country and A goes way up and M goes down, that tells you something important. So I'm not particularly interested in cross-nation comparisons, but changes within a nation with economics, with politics, and the like. There are universals, however. And so, for example, there's a study of 790,000 people from 190 countries, which looks at the relationship of optimism to physical health and finds it's universal. There just aren't exceptions to it. So while I do take seriously national, racial, cultural differences, I'm also in a hunt for what it is to be a human being.
Hello. Hi. So I'm sure you're familiar with the development of this new idea of toxic positivity, and I was wondering, how does positive psychology play a role in avoiding becoming toxic positivity?
Yes, so people talk about toxic positivity. Be happy. Damn it, if you want to live longer, you damn well better be happy. Well, the happiness police and the like. So it turns out almost all the things that I've talked about are not adopted unless you believe it. So in general, when people tell you what to do, it's resisted. So happiness police doesn't make much sense to me, but happiness education does. So I think it's very important for me not to say, damn it, get optimistic, but rather, look, here's the literature on black females' life expectancy, optimists and pessimists. And optimistic black females live 4.5 years longer than pessimists. So it's an educative matter for me rather than a policing matter. But if you're in an environment which everyone is telling you, be positive, you will probably resist that.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Oh.
Can we have a non-student question?
Yes, of course. We'll have this student ask a question, and then I'll get to him.
We'll finish with the student if we can. Okay. Let's give you a microphone. Oh, thank you. I was going to shout.
We live in a society that is split with chasms of political differences and generational differences between our generation and 2 generations down. how can you connect verbally with people to try to bridge those gaps? Because right now it's a really problematic situation.
I'm interested and I read about and teach people 60 years younger than I am. And so I'm quite concerned with generational differences. And I really don't have a solution to it. My search has been for universals that bridge generations. So I think PERMA and pursuing PERMA is a universal across generations. Different generations are doing it differently, and different generations weight these different things differently. And I think we have to respect that. Optimism is a universal. It's just plain good idea to learn to be optimistic if you want to live longer, be healthier, lower morbidity, more success. But it's very hard for me to deal with the obvious generational differences I see between my generation and your generation, in which we were raised to be world beaters. Whereas my children and grandchildren's generation, it's more about finding a decent life. And I think we have to respect that, and we can understand the causes. But I'm woefully inadequate about policy suggestions across generations. Sorry about that. And can we finish with a student question?
Hi, I really enjoyed every minute of your talk, and you're one of the very few people I saw who are looking at the advantages of AI systems in psychology. And my question is, considering the propensity of AI technologies to hallucinate and give misinformation at times, isn't it a bit scary to think about using the AI systems for understanding and engaging with people's narratives in the therapeutic interventions? I mean, if we see the positive side of it, a kid from India could directly probably interact with Dr. Martin Seligman. But if we see the other side of the coin, it could be like, what if he's getting some kind of misinformation that he shouldn't be getting? So what do you think about this situation?
Okay. First, something about India, and then something about AI. So people have asked me what my large goal for positive psychology is. It's called 2051, and it is that by the year 2051, 51% of the world's population will be flourishing. That's my goal. Therefore, I'm extremely interested in both India and China. And I've had about 20 Indian graduate students and many Chinese graduate students. And positive psychology is a really growing concern in China, but not yet in India, which is now larger than China. So I'm very interested in cultivating positive psychology in India. And that then turns me to AI. There are interventions and measures that build happiness, but there aren't enough coaches to go around. So AI looks very hopeful to me. What I want to say about AI is I'm not a doomsayer about AI. I know the literature. I've read all the scary stuff. Some of these people are friends of mine. But the history of technology has generally been all sorts of Luddites tell us all the awful things that might occur. But then, as the technology goes on, these things get corrected in time. Now, doing Ask Martin 300 times, I have not found a single hallucination. I have not found any misinformation. It really is more accurate than I am. And so I guess I want to say a lot of what's wrong with your education at Dickinson and at every great university is we teach you to be really good at what's wrong with things. We teach your critical intelligence. Well, I think finding out what's wrong with things is child's play. Finding out what's right with something is genius.
This concludes tonight's presentation. Please join us in the lobby for the book sale and signing. As a reminder, due to the acoustics in the ATS lobby, we ask that you please keep the noise level low so that our guests can have meaningful conversations with those purchasing books. We will also have index cards so that you can write your name to ensure proper spelling. Thank you. Please join me in thanking Dr. Seligman.